Hello, everybody. This is Terrence Free Jazz Hour, and for a change, we are not in the Abbey Park Cemetery, but not very far from it. And actually, I'm in my fantasy land, and I don't know if you can see it, but I am having a creative explosion in my head. And we have the absolute amazing honor of talking to the artist who creates this fantasy land, Gina Southgate.
Hi.
Gina,
Hi,
I'm very
Tara.
tired today.
Are you?
Yes, yes. Last night I thought I should read up on you, and then I went on your website and I started reading up, and it was a never-ending read. And now in my head I've got this brewing stew of information, like yeah, long biography, and you have this amazing CV. All the things that you do, all the festivals that you play, that you perform in all over the place. God, I just don't even know where to begin.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know. I'm very verbose and I do my own website, so it's kind of. Yeah, and it's very out of date actually. There's been many, many more things since I last made that statement on the website, which I think was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's make things simple and let's start from the beginning. Tell me, how did you become an artist? Have you always been an artist? Were you
Yeah.
an artist as a child?
Not really. I've always been an artist as an adult, but as a child, I was more of a kind of reader, and I wrote a lot. My mum always said that I wrote great stories and that I should be a writer. And actually, I've just come full circle to that because I've been writing articles for the Sussex Jazz magazine, which has been really great, and it's really lovely to challenge myself with a few by putting down a few words, so this is a new thing. But as for being an artist as a child, no. But what happened when I was about 14, I decided, my niece went to art college to become a fashion designer, and our school went on a visit to the Southend Tech, and I went there, and there were all these people just kind of standing around in studios wearing woolly jumpers and looking really cool, and I just thought, wow, what are they doing? I don't know what they're doing, but I just want to do that. And so I kind of then worked very hard to get my art O level in order to go off to Southend College to follow in my niece. My nieces are older than me, three of them. My older niece's footsteps, and I went off to do a vocational diploma, which was either going to be window dressing or photography, I thought. And when I got there, I realised I had enough qualifications to go on to do foundation, which gives you the opportunity to then go and do a degree. So it was just a kind of progression of things. There was no big plan, and there wasn't at the time, it wasn't really like, people in my family didn't really go into further education, and my mum couldn't understand, and my dad was very creative and was always behind me whatever choices I made, but my mum couldn't really understand why I would want to go and do art, because it didn't lead ever to a proper job. And her idea of my success would have been if I'd have got a decent job in the city or worked in a bank, or job for life in those days. And I can understand as I get older where her fears came from. But no, they were both my parents are now dead, but they were very, very supportive throughout all of my life. And although a lot of the time they didn't really get what I was doing, they were always behind it, and were very proud of my achievements and my successes. So that was good, yeah.
Right. So you became an artist. You went to art school and then you became an artist. And then how did you become this live action free jazz painter? I mean, I don't even know how you define yourself. Do you have a name for the what you do?
Um, Not really. It's interesting. All of these kind of words and names have come about through me having to describe myself when applying for gigs or festivals or telling people what I do. So that it's kind of interesting because there are more people doing what I do now, and it's always something that has been done. I mean, you know, if you think about people like Toulouse-Lautrec, for example, he went into music halls and painted can-can girls. And, you know, this has been something, there's always been a fascination among artists for capturing or attempting to capture other performance styles or types, genres. People painting dancers, Degas, for example, you know, a drawing for his sculpture. Picasso liked to paint live things, particularly bullfights in his case. That was a different thing altogether. But I can see the similarity because it's about capturing the power and the energy and the essence, the movement. This is really, I'll go back to what I did at art school. So I did silversmithing and metalwork.
Oh,
my degree was silversmithing and metalwork.
So it wasn't painting?
Wasn't painting.
Oh, interesting.
I did, screen printing was my favourite thing when I was on foundation. I was young and I had no real confidence in my drawing ability, and I had no real guidance from people in the education system. Nobody kind of said, well, just go on for it. If you want to paint and draw, you know, it will come with you as the years progress. Nobody said that. People kind of just went along with the idea that I thought I had to do something three-dimensional design of some description because that was something palpable, tangible, and also something you didn't have to be particularly talented to make. Because there was a technique in between your talent and your production. So with, say, if working with clay, nobody is expecting the outcome. So, you know, you can make something without actually, I'm not saying that people that make things in clay or wood or metal don't have talent and aren't skilled, but it's a different set of skills. It's a different skill base. It's about technique as well as your creativity. So that for me was, I applied for three-dimensional design at Brighton and Middlesex, but I didn't get in. And then Camberwell offered me a place on the pool choice to do silversmithing, and I was like, well, I don't really want to do silversmithing, but I'm 17, I can leave home, I can go to London, get a full grant and live away from home and go and do a degree. What's not to like?
Cool.
Or I can go back and do another year's foundation and then reapply for the things that I really wanted to do. But I wasn't convinced that I knew what I really wanted to do anyway. So I just took the silversmithing and metalwork degree. It was really after my experience at Southend College, which had been fantastic and full of really vibrant, wild people making really fantastic artwork. I mean, Southend was a hotbed at that time. We had a lot of people leave there that you will have heard of these days, mostly musicians. So Dave Garn from Depeche Mode, Alison Moyet, they were all in my year group or 1 year below or above at Southend. There was Steve Linnard, who was a fashion designer, just to name a few people that were on a small foundation course in Essex.
Amazing,
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a really amazing time, and I met fantastic people and had fun and thought this was how art college was going to be. And then I got to Camberwell, and the metalwork department was in a basement under the Camberwell Road. It was bearded men mainly. There was a few women in a bit like jazz really, but in flared trousers still. This was post-punk, 1970. This is 79 now. And drinking from tin mugs and grunting and making...
The hippies still.
They were the hippies still, even though punk had happened and I'd been through this great punk and post-punk experience. So I got there, and then we were asked to raise a bowl. Now, you took a flat disc of metal, copper, and you have to hammer in a circular motion until you get to the middle, and then it raises up a tiny bit. Then you have to go and heat it till it's red heat, and it's called annealing. Stick it in the acid and then hammer it again. And so this is days. The bowl slowly comes up. Days. So weeks, months, years. It took me 1 whole year to make a teapot.
Wow.
Yeah. Which, you know, I was doing other things. So you made your teapot maybe 3 days a week. And then you did a bit of art history. Then you did a subsidiary. So I still used to do screen printing. You were a student, so you messed about, you had fun, you didn't work, you did technical drawing. I mean, my God, I had to do technical drawing. We had to draw with a rotoring pen, whatever we were going to make. We had to design it, we had to do a technical drawing of it, and then we had to do a presentation drawing of it. So to envisage what it was going to look like a year later. Anyway, so I kind of lost the plot in the second year, and I started to go out with a trumpet player at this time. An improvising trumpet player that took me to the London Musicians Collective and introduced me to improvisation, and took me to Bracknell Jazz Festival and introduced me to jazz. And on the fringes of Bracknell Jazz Festival were people like Rip Rig and Panic, and the people. There were people on the fringes that were kind of quite out there, and I could see that there was potential in this world, but I didn't know what the potential was. And I wasn't into the music at the time, and I didn't understand it, I didn't get it, I didn't like it, but I was having fun with the trumpet player, and our world was quite a big world. He lived in Camden, I was still living in Peckham with being at art school in Camberwell. So I had my Camberwell world going on, and I had my Camden world going on, I had my jazz world going on, and my silversmithing world going on.
Oh God, sounds so exciting.
It was exciting. But the course was secondary to all of that. But so by the third year, I decided that, well, okay, I've come this far. If it's only going to be another year, and if I work hard now, I'll get a decent degree rather than a rubbish one. So I decided to pull my finger out in the third year to get my degree. I got my degree, and then the devastation came. So to get my degree, the work I was making, the trumpet player gave me a saxophone, and it had a broken octave key.
Okay.
And I could have mended the octave key and played the saxophone, but instead of that I started to draw it and make close-up detailed drawings of the saxophone. So this informed my I made sculptural dish forms for my degree, and they were based on, but very removed from the saxophone by the end, and they were very lovely things in cast pewter, spun pewter with brass structures holding them based on the structure of the saxophone. And then I had some made in blown glass, and where I made just the structure that supported them, and they were quite removed. In silversmithing you really had to make functional objects, but these things were quite removed from function,
right.
And they were becoming quite sculptural. So after I got my degree, and then I decided to apply for the Royal College. I didn't get in, and then I was living in Brixton, and I lived in a room that didn't have a window, or it had a window onto a sort of yard that had no light. It had no natural daylight. So it's a shock when you leave college. You leave all your support system behind you. You then, to do something like craft metalwork, you then need a workshop. So I could either have gone down the route of a crafts council setting up grant to get a workshop together, or I didn't know what to do. So I started to make jewellery in my bedroom, and at that time I started to work in adult education and do a bit of teaching. I had a placement in a jeweller's in Hampstead where 3 of us from college had workbenches that we could use a couple of days a week. So I kept it all going and trying. I had a few shows with metalwork. I did a few commissions for architects. I had a few things happening, but the process was so laborious, and without the proper machinery and equipment, it was really, really tough. And also I kind of figured that you can't really make much money from craft metalwork because it is so slow that, and it is, I felt I could see the end of my life like just making things slowly, days of sanding, days of filing, days of polishing. It so wasn't really my bag.
Right.
And then so that's how I moved things into different. Well, meanwhile, I was going to gigs still. People in those days, it was the old, what Stuart Lee would call the old nothing times. There were no computers, so if you wanted to put a poster or a flyer together for a gig, you would have to get someone to make it for you. So the musicians used to say to me, "Oh, Gina, you're an artist. Make me a poster, or make me a flyer, or make me a backdrop." Or so I started to do things like that. And then before the LMC, the London Musicians Collective, disbanded completely, there was an event there called the Jazz Punk Bonanza, that I painted all these backdrops for. And then I painted backdrops for the London Film Co-op's 25th birthday, which was at Ulu in the swimming pool. It was a massive, amazing event, and with musicians, underwater musicians. It was a film stuff being projected, and I did all these kind of big paintings of fish, very typical, but all of those kind of things. And then I did stuff for a nightclub called the Mix, which my friend Rory and my friend Ange used to run at the Scala at King's Cross and various venues, the Metro Cinema. Rave was starting to happen a bit. People kind of wanted a visual, so I got involved in that aspect of putting visual stuff together. Painting, I realised that painting was much more rewarding on a quicker level than making metal things. And this coincided, I split up with the trumpet player. I realised for the first time a while after that actually I really loved jazz gigs, and I really missed going to jazz gigs.
Okay.
But I didn't have anyone to go with, because none of my mates were interested in that kind of music. And so I started to go on my own. So I just started to take my sketchbook with me and draw. And then...
so you were a solitary jazz chick?
At that time, at times, I always had friends on the scene that I knew from the years that I was going anyway. So Graham McEachin, who now runs the 100 Years Gallery, is a bass player. Yeah. And he used to be at gigs, and I used to always say hi to Graham and chat to Graham. And my other really good friend, Chris Cornetto, he used to bop around the scene, and we'd meet up. Also, you couldn't just text someone and say, "You coming to a gig tonight?" You had to send him a postcard. So Chris Cornetto used to send me a postcard. And also I lived in squats, so I had no phone. No one could ever phone me. And I always used to have to get all my 10 pences together and go to on a Friday and go to the phone box and phone like 20 people that I knew that had phones and say, "What are you doing tonight? You coming out tonight? So then at some point there was this rebirth of the cool. Yeah, which put jazz on the British contemporary map. So there was like Working Week was around at that time. I remember there was a whole page article about Steve Noble in The Guardian. It was really happening. So the Metro Cinema was in Soho, and they had like a jazz all-nighter where people would go and dance. So it was kind of becoming, and Giles Peterson was running nights, first of all upstairs at the Electric Ballroom. So I used to go dancing there with Chris Cornetto. And then he started to put on jazz dance at the WAG, Whiskey A Go-Go, in Wardour Street. That was a Monday night. And so there was this, as well as the improv scene I was kind of closely linked to, there was this burgeoning jazz dance scene that I was a soul girl as a teenager. I used to go to the Gold Mine, used to go to soul clubs, and I was able to do that again. So going full circle, post-punk, then jazz, coming back to jazz dance.
So what was jazz dance? What is jazz dance? Because I know today the jazz dance is swing, Lindy Hop. What kind of dance was going on at that time?
Well, you're asking me. So there was there were some people called IDJ, I Dance Jazz. So I guess, I mean, at Dingwalls, when I used to go to Dingwalls, I guess there were people. There was a guy called Anzi that used to wear spats and like jazz shoes, you know, brogues,
okay.
black and white brogues, dressing in kind of 40s style suits, but they were really, really energetic. Whereas my other friend Rocky, who is a jazz dancer and still would be jazz dancing if we could go out to clubs at the moment, but his thing, I think, was more from an athletic approach. So there are people that really, really train to do this, and it's like you do. So there's, I suppose you can say that there's bits of breakdancing involved, and there's, I don't necessarily know all the terminology, but it's a very athletic thing. But at Dingwalls, what would happen is the people would form a circle, and the dancer would go into the centre of the circle, and they'd do their bit, and then they'd go out again.
Yeah.
So it's like a show.
And what kind of music was being played? Was it?
So it was like all, so Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers.
Okay, yeah, right.
So like the dancers like the really, really fast hard bop, I would say.
Yeah.
But you know what? Although I've been around this music for all of like my adult life now, and I go to see loads of stuff, I don't know the terminology, and I often don't know the bands, and I just kind of, you know, but yeah, so it was, there was the whole jazz dance thing going on, and I was involved in that.
Right.
But
it sounds like, just sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
It just sounds like so much like the Beat Generation and the Subterraneans. You know, Jack Kerouac's time. You know, everything that you've described, I'm just
that was
imagining.
That was like that was 30 years before.
Yes, exactly. So
because that was in the 50s.
Yeah. What year was this? What years?
Okay, so timeline. I went to Southend Tech in 1977 for 2 years.
Oh.
So punk had just burst onto the scene and influenced everything that we thought about. People were really into Ian Dury and Lou Reed and Patti Smith and that kind of area of music on my foundation. And Bowie was big, and so there was that. And then so that was 77 to 79, 2 years at Southend College. Then 79 to 82, I was at Camberwell. Getting into that kind of music, getting into jazz and improvised music, but not realising it, as well as going to see bands at Hammersmith Palais, still into sort of post-punk. So I went to see Iggy Pop, for example, at Hammersmith Palais. So punk and post-punk music still. There wasn't so much to dance to in those days. Like art school parties would play Talking Heads, for example. And then so 82 I left, and then we're talking with the start, so we're talking about 85 I think, when Giles was playing at the WAG. 84, 85. Dingwall's years were 87, 88, 89 I think. 88, 89 definitely. 90. Dingwall's closed in 91. So in 88 I went off travelling on my own, which didn't end that great. I was a bit confused, because I was a bit confused about all this thing about what I was doing with my life, because I didn't want to be a metal worker anymore, and I didn't know what to be, and I didn't have any security. I didn't have anywhere properly to live. I could have gone home and lived with my mum and dad, but at 28, 29, why would I do that when I'd left when I was 18, you know? So I came back from travelling, and the first thing I did was I went to a gig. One of the first things I did was I went to a gig at the Jazz Cafe, which then was the Small Jazz Cafe
in Camden,
Newington Green.
Okay.
Did you know that one?
No.
So it was that was run by John Darbner and his business partner, whose name escapes me, but they just opened it, and I went and saw somebody like Bucky Leo, and I know that Winston Clifford would have been drumming, because he was always drumming at the Little Jazz Cafe. And I remember saying to John Darbner, who was Mr. Jazz Cafe, you've got nothing on your walls, let me have an exhibition.
Oh.
And he said, well, what have you got? And I said, at this coincided with, I'd come back from travelling, and I was staying at a friend's flat in Camden, that I was renting a room, and my other friend, my good friend Angela, said, oh, I've got a spare room if you'd like to use it as a studio. Well, I mean, people just don't have that kind of thing anymore, but it was amazing. I shared it with some African drums from what were they called? Not Amazulu. It was another group of Xhosa African drummers who had these big, beautiful drums that Ange used to store in her spare room. So I was able to use this room. So I said to the guy from the Jazz Cafe, well, I haven't really got anything, but if you want to come round to my studio and see, what I'm going to do. So, and also I'd just started working in a picture framers part-time. And so I had this one drawing, and I framed it really professionally, really beautifully. And on the Sunday morning, him and his wife came round to my so-called studio, and he said, well, is that all you've got? And I said, well, yes, but look, it's brilliant, isn't it? This is all I've got now, but it's not all I'm going to have, So he said, okay. So he said, how long do you need? I said, well, about 6 weeks. So I filled the whole Jazz Cafe with drawings, live drawings, and some horrible drawings that I did in the studio just from my imagination. I painted this huge 10-foot painting that was framed in 2 huge frames. I mean, I was really ambitious without having it was like I had all the ways of putting this show together, but the work was largely pretty dreadful. But the massive painting from behind the stage, Giles Peterson bought it, and it was such an amazing thing for me, because I went to the WAG Club and he gave me 500 quid in cash, and I stuffed it in my boot, because I mean, it was such an enormous amount of money in like 1988.
Amazing.
And then me and my friends, we got a van, and we took it down to Giles. Giles lived in Wapping then, and we took it down and hung it in Giles's space opposite his massive record collection. And it was like, wow. And then I sold some other things. I made this amazing, going back to my three-dimensional references, I made a machine he had a conservatory in the Jazz Cafe, in the back of Glass Conservatory, and I made this machine out of an old bicycle wheel that had all these sculptural forms made out of mod rock and mirror that revolved and put light all around the ceiling. And I got my friend who made machines, I went and bought a motor. You could go into Soho to some little electrical device shop and buy a motor. I bought a motor, and my friend came and wired it up for me. It was all these like really, there were these great moments of like putting this show together.
Yeah.
And then the opening night, I put a band together with, or they put a group together. It was Paul Shearsmith, Chris Cornetto, Rob Mills, I think Tony Minion, maybe Parney Wallace, I don't know, but it was about an 8-piece band to open the exhibition, and we had a really great night. I painted some t-shirts and sold them, and I sold work, and it was just a really successful, beautiful thing.
Sounds like lots of work was put into it, and
loads of work was put into it. All my work was
Wow.
put into it. So I worked on it all the time. I worked in the picture framers 2 days a week, and then the rest of the time I put this show together. And because it was so successful, I just thought, do you know what? This is what I'm going to do. This
Amazing.
is what is going to be my life now.
That is so amazing, so inspiring, Gina. I am inspired. This is amazing. Yeah, how you went there, you saw an opportunity, you grabbed it, and then you just built a whole show around it, and then your life.
I think what it was that was where my life was at, and that's where my life had been at for a long time. But I hadn't known how to capture that and make it into something tangible that I could work with, not just the play element of my life, but the work element of my life, because I had all the elements were there, You know, being an artist already, being a designer, having lots of friends that were doing music or interested in music or around music. It was all there. And another really great thing that happened at that time was I have a really good friend, Rob Mills, who's a saxophone player, and another good friend, Tony Minion, who's a double bass player. Now, Tony Minion ran the print shop. There was a drop-in print shop. It was a community-based thing in Gray's Inn Road called the 1A Centre, and you could go there and you could print, screen print, fabrics or paper, and just do. So I used to go there I printed posters for Alan, for example, before we were together, and I used to go in there to do my screen printing. But he was a bass player, so somehow Rob and Tony, I thought they had a lot in common. They didn't know each other, but I think I introduced them. And then, well, Rob said to me, you know, you can draw me. And so Rob used to come to my flat once a week, and I used to play, and I used to draw him, and these sessions were really nice. Okay. And then I introduced Tony because I thought, well, that could work really well. And they wrote tunes together, and we used to have this session, I think it was every Thursday, where we'd go to either my flat or Tony's flat, and we'd do a day where they would play and I would draw them. So this was, for me, it was not like being at a live gig where everything's urgent and people are watching you. It was like a real luxury of almost like a life drawing session where you actually study the form. Right. That's really, you can really get a chance to study that. So you know, if you ask me to draw a double bass with my eyes closed now, I can do it, and it's really from those sessions of working with Tony and Rob. And Rob played alto. Did Rob play alto? Now I'm baffed. Or did he play tenor? I'm not sure.
So that's Rob Mills, you said.
Rob Mills, right. Yeah. He was in. Later on, he was a saxophone player based in London and was around the scene for years. He was around the LMC. I mean, he used to run a club in Covent Garden. It was a pub in Covent Garden. I can't think what it was called, but he used to run an improv night there. Okay. But he was in Echo City, which is the group that made musical instruments from gas piping and so on. But,
I didn't even know. Okay.
Yeah, but he's moved to Swanage now, so I think he's active in Swanage, and he also is. I've been in exhibitions with Rob because we've done a couple of exhibitions where people that play music that also make art, and I was the person that made art but also made sound sometimes with my stuff. So we've had a couple of group shows, 2 or 3 group shows together locally in the Stoke Newington Library.
Okay, amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's how you started live painting. That was more. It was more drawing than drawing.
But I was still using paint and being experimental. So these days were long periods of time where I could just experiment, and then I could take that experimentation back to my studio, and make work from the information that I'd gained on those days, as well as going out to gigs and working on a small scale. Yeah. I was only working on a small scale at gigs then.
Right. And then, so where did the journey take you from there? So live drawings, and then when did you start? How did you progress into live paintings?
Right. The first time that happened was
at live gigs.
Yeah. So there was a group called the Brothers and Sisters of the Free Spirit, and that was Graham McEachin. John Grieve. John Grieve is a brilliant tenor player. I don't know if he's worked...
Oh, hold on, John Grieve.
Yeah, he was in a band called Nurse Without Wound. It's his famous thing, I think. But he's moved to Oxford now, so he's not on the London scene now. Yeah. He's been there a while. And Tina Fortune Heisman was her name. She was the vocalist that was then Graham McEachin's partner for years after. And a drummer from Bristol, Roger Skirman.
Okay.
And I think Alan Wilkinson. Alan was in it.
Okay.
And we did it was called the Love Not Money tour. And it was quite a joke because it was really love not money, because we did like 5 or 6 gigs in a week around London, but they were all free to the public. So we played in the Anarchist Bookshop in Brixton, for example, all these venues. I think we played in the Red Rose Club in Finsbury Park, various venues. But so they asked me to paint with them. So I didn't do a painting a night like I would now. Like now I would do 1 to 4 paintings or more, depending on how many groups, how many sets, what the situation is, how big the room is, all of those things. I still work small sometimes, but not so much now, particularly if it's for an audience. But I took a few canvases all over, and I worked on them over the nights, so they weren't actually completely live of that moment, but they were of the same group night after night after night. Right. And they were probably pretty awful, but
Okay.
there was a really nice one of Maggie Nichols.
Maggie Nichols
was on it, yeah. Maggie and Tina, I think there's a really nice one of them. I think I gave that to Maggie for her 50th actually. And then there was one that I had here for years that I eventually painted over, but I like to do that now. So now if I paint over a live gig painting, what I like the energy of the previous existence to come through in some way. So I don't necessarily cover everything up. I kind of keep elements of that as part of the story and then turn them into an abstract painting maybe.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I was meaning to ask, so how does this this is mystifying, how does this sound that travels through your brain, your body, and then turns into this painting coming out of this brush with all these paints, what's going on?
So I think you just captured it actually, that it is exactly that. So it's coming in there, or it's coming in at the end of the brush, or it's coming in when I reach into my suitcase and choose some paint, whether I'm choosing a colour or whether I'm choosing a texture, because I have various colours, various textures, various methods of applying the paint to the surface. So I might work directly out of the tube, or I might squeeze the paint, I might water it down, I might make it runny, there's a multitude of things that I could do in the situation, and I don't know what drives the first choices that I make, and I don't know how that manifests itself throughout the gig. What I do know is that sometimes I catch myself and I think, hang on, you don't have to make that decision, because you are after all making a painting. So I have to actually remind myself sometimes that I'm making a painting, because a lot of the thing is like, yeah, it's out of there, into there, up there, in there, through there, in there, down, and it's backwards and forwards. It's between there's the instinctive, receptive part of my brain that is not thinking. There's the thinking part of my brain that is aware of what I can make visually. And then there is the tempo, often is the thing that drives. So if something is quiet and contemplative, I might be working with a liquid, and I might be kind of, and I'm also often in situations where I've got to be very careful not to make a noise. So I can't always respond as quickly as I might, because I can't get that thing. It's like I've got a plastic thing in there that's going to make a noise if I pick that tube of paint up, for example. And then if I'm brushing a canvas, it's sonic. These things are sonic. So even if I'm brushing like that, if it's a quiet gig, if it's a really quiet improv gig, say, in a small room with an audience of 10, then I don't want to be heard, because I'm not part of the performance. and that's a completely different experience to when I am part of the performance, because often I use these things performatively where I purposefully make sound and I interact with a musician. So I might do a duo piece with, for example, I used to do a lot of duo work with John Russell, and if you know anything about his playing, he plays his guitar in a completely abstract fashion, or I don't want to get into trouble with the terminology here, but he's not playing tunes.
No.
And there is space for me to interact with him, but he's bold enough to know when I'm not making a sound that he hasn't got to stop and wait for me, so it's a kind of, he's not necessarily even looking at what I'm doing, so he doesn't know if I'm doing something visual or not. But if I'm making sound with what I'm doing, then he will be working with that as well as with whatever's going on with him. So it might not just be, I haven't even got really an example of it. It might be my easel might be part of the sound making process, or as I've demonstrated these things, or the canvas itself is a drum. You can tighten the canvas up like tightening the drum up, so you can stretch it till it makes a lot more sound. It's much more sonic. So there are those things, and then often I will use props. So I'll use ping pong balls and shoe trees and lots and lots of things, objects that I can incorporate into the visual if I'm doing a sonic performance with somebody. So.
Right.
I often do sonic performances where I don't make a painting, where I just use things, found objects, to make sound. So interacting with musicians. So there's levels of what I do. There's a visual level. There's a completely responsive, where I am like a photographer in the room, responding to a band that should not know that I'm there. Then there's a halfway where I'm kind of might be seen by the audience because I'm standing near the band and I'm part of like the package of the gig, the band and then the painter and the audience. And then there is the thing where I'm either working on a large scale painting with a soloist often. I've been doing some work with a young clarinet player called Cara Doyle, who is Julia Doyle's niece, and she's at Guildhall, but I've done a few gigs with her, and this is like, before lockdown was one of the last gigs I did with her and a female tuba player, and it's really great, because they're not from any field that I usually work with. They're Guildhall students, and they haven't necessarily found their area yet. So it's very fresh because they don't have a preconception of what I'm going to do, and I don't have a preconception from them because they're not jazz. They're not even improvisers. Even, because improvisers have their chops. They have the things that they know, and they like to use what they know, even if they try to step backwards and make something different every single time. An experienced player is too experienced to be like the baby with the paintbrush, like me, like the kid of 5. A kid of 5 could do that. Well, no one with the amount of experience that a good improviser has can start from a blank canvas again. Never, because we've learnt too much.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to know, fantastic. So you said that you did not like the music in the beginning, and then you started enjoying it, and then you became part of it, and you started performing. You became an improviser yourself.
Yeah.
And so you like jazz?
I like jazz, yeah. I think it's a completely different thing to being involved and engaged. When I'm painting, I have a completely different relationship to if I'm just in the audience.
Mm.
I'm not a very good audience member because I'm not very good at just sitting still, particularly if the music is frenetic and I want to dance.
You want to dance.
I want to dance. And now actually it's really interesting because the improv scene has changed in as much as there are still the same small clubs that have small attentive audiences, but I think it's further reaching. So the example that I always use is seeing Peter Brotzman play at Cafe Otto on a Saturday night, where there are girls, young women in party dresses dancing to Peter Brotzman. To me, that is just so fantastic.
When did that happen? I never saw it happen.
You weren't there.
Oh, damn.
What a shame.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I'd say probably, sorry, my nose is running, it's cold in the studio. I would say it probably started happening about 10 years ago. I think since Cafe Otto, I don't know how long Cafe Otto, has it been 10 years?
I have no idea.
I think because also there's a lot of standing room at Cafe Otto. If you get a big audience there, those that are standing can move. There is a freedom to move. When I used to go to the China Pig Club, which was in a pub down bottom of Mare Street near the canal, can't remember, there was a lot of Hackney people that used to go to that, and it was their older generation of Hackney people now. That was run by Dave Draper, and Doffy, his wife, and her friends used to dance because there was quite a lot of South African music.
Okay, yeah.
Improv with people like Lewis Maholo, but it was kind of, and with when you went to a Dudu Pequana gig, people would be dancing.
Right. I'm just wondering how. I've never ever seen anyone dance to free improv. Or free jazz. I've never. I mean, except if it's the Vision Festival type of dancers doing that abstract dancing. I've never seen anyone actually doing it for the sake of enjoyment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There are dancers like when Maggie used to run the Gathering, which she still does. The Gathering was a big part of my kind of improv experience. Dancers would turn up to that and do movement. I actually did a tour with a dancer and with Viv Corringham, vocalist, and Ashley Marsh, who makes sound sculpture and is a reeds player. And we did an Arts Council funded tour around 97 where we did a few gigs around the country, and Sophia was very much a part. We were all, it was a quartet, so Sophia, the movement was as much a part of the quartet as me or the musicians. It was an integrated concept.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But the dancing, I think, is now. I mean, well, I think very much like last year I was at the We Out Here festival, and a lot of the young bands, jazz musicians, they do invite a big dance audience.
Okay.
It's a big part of the kind of the movement as it is now.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't had the pleasure to.
So the Shabaka Hutchins kind of school, where the audience are going. So, for example, the Sons of Kemet and what's the other one? Apollo. What's that called? Oh God, it will come to me in a minute. That the audience are dancing to that.
Right. Okay, great. So who are your favourite musicians?
Oh, no.
Okay, you don't have to answer that question. You know everybody, and you've performed with so many people. Yeah.
How can I say who is my favourite? Everyone brings a different quality to the table. And I have things that I love and things that what I like to go and see live is completely different to what I like to listen to. I mean, I don't unless I'm in here painting away and I want to get some kind of energy into what I'm doing. I mean, I rarely listen to improv. I'll go home and in my kitchen, Alan will be listening to improv,
Right.
cooking his dinner in the kitchen or cooking our dinner. He loves that. That's his thing.
listens
and
to
he listens to
music,
it as
okay.
well as plays it.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm a bit of a fraud on that level. It's like the reason I love to paint that is because it is the area where I will get the most abstract truth out of the music.
Okay, let's just tell me. This is something that I've been meaning to ask, but I couldn't really put it into words. So I want to know. So what is like? What does it give you? How does it inspire? How does this music? I don't know what I'm trying to ask.
No, I know what you're trying to ask.
Yeah. What?
You tried to ask it when you asked me what went on. So what people want to know is whether I see colour. There's a term for that, and I can't remember.
I want
that.
to know what kind of how does it move you?
Right. So improv music, when it's played well, although I talked about people having their licks and knowing what they're going to do, they've got their. I can go and see Alan, and I kind of know. There's areas where I kind of know what he's going to do next, even though he may not think that he knows what he's going to do next. And there are other musicians, so it's what makes people different. So, for example, what makes Steve Noble different from Mark Sanders? They've got drum kits, but they're completely different musicians doing completely different things. And there are going to be crossovers between musicians, but people are going to do different things. But the thing about abstract music is it comes without preconception. So improvised music is I don't know where it's going to go. So say somebody's playing some timed piece, I kind of know what's going to happen. Ba 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 ba. Improvised music is going to be so it's not, and I'm there painting, but I don't know what's coming next. So I'm working with something that is abstract, and I'm trying to work in an abstract way, even though I might end up with an image of the musician. I don't want it to be a person in a static position. So say this picture of Alex. I don't want
Alex Ward.
Yeah, this is Alex Ward. I don't want it to be someone holding a guitar.
Yeah.
And if I can capture some of the essence of what they're doing, I'm excited about that.
So that's the essence of
I hope so.
interpreted by yeah.
Also, it's about how long I have. If I'd have had longer, I may have gone in more. I think it was probably a short piece. It was a solo it was something Mark Wastell put together.
Okay.
It was actually the last time we saw Simon Fell live.
Right.
But it was Mark Wastell, Alex Ward, Simon Fell. I don't know if Rodri was on the gig, but anyway, there were a couple of trio. It was a trio, a duo, and a solo. I think Alex's solo was probably very short.
How much time did you put into this?
Well, probably as long as it was. He was on stage, so he was probably on stage perhaps for 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
All right, wow.
So, however long I've got. I mean, I work for as long as I have.
Right, so that was 15, 20 minutes.
And the hard thing is when there's a gig nowadays with 2 sets and 2 45-minute sets, it's like, am I going to work on the same painting, two 45-minute sets? It can just go so...
It's too long.
It can be too long. I have to decide when to stop then. And that's a difficult thing. I love the challenge. That's what I love about painting live, is I love the challenge of working. So first of all, you've got to arrive at the gig. You've got to have everything with you because you can't forget anything, otherwise you're not prepared. The whole thing will go completely wrong. It's a bit like the same as the musician has got to have all their bits and pieces with them. They've all got to be ready, packed. Get there, set up, you have a start time. It's like a race. You have a start time, you have a finish time. I don't control that because I'm being receptive in this situation. I'm talking about that setup. So I know that I've only got as long as they've got, and then that's it. And I try not to mess with the paintings after.
Okay, great.
Sometimes I have, but I don't choose to do that.
Okay. Something that has just come up in my mind is, so do you when you're painting, are there any emotions involved when there's music going on?
Yeah, yeah,
You're on
yeah.
the canvas. Emotions are involved. You're not
Yeah.
just an instrument translating the
There is
sounds into
there is
painting.
emotion. It's like everything. It's like if I can just forget the crap of life whilst I'm there, then it's successful, that I've achieved something that's great. If I'm just wittering in my head about, oh God, I hope I'm not disturbing that person on the right because I'm sure that I'm in their peripheral vision. Oh dear, and what about that person? And oh look, that person's here, and I'm, you know, and
Yeah.
and oh, and really, if I can, oh yeah, oh my God, did I leave the car? Have I parked? Have I? Oh no, look, I'm just doing what I always do. I'm just painting, and I'm going straight in with, oh, and I don't want to paint the saxophone yellow. I hate painting the saxophone yellow. Why have I started with yellow? Oh my God, now I've put black down there. Now everything's going to be grey because I'm going to pick up the black. So there are technical. If I can just get rid of all that stuff, if I can start from a good place and maintain the feeling that I'm not caught up in what I'm doing, then I feel that I'm going to produce something good. It doesn't always work. Right. It's not always. There's no formula, and there could be a formula. I could do things really in a formulaic way. I know what's in front of me. I know, yeah. And sometimes I do, just to kind of stop a painting from being absolutely dreadful, because I kind of know now that almost everything I do is either going to go on social media from me or from someone else. And so I'm kind of aware that the live gig situation is no longer perhaps the place for me to experiment anymore. Although I do keep pushing, because if I don't keep pushing, what am I doing? I could just be here making prints of things, or I could be here formulaically painting double bases that I know would sell, or, you know, it's not what I'm about. I'm about striving all the time. And if I wasn't striving, and that's also why I have so much work around me, because I'm not someone, you know, I often forget to get on with the selling of the work because I'm on the next thing. I'm always on the next thing.
Okay.
Running from one project to another.
Yeah.
Not this year as much, and actually I must say that this year has been challenging, and I very much feel sorry for all the people that aren't playing gigs that really need an audience to do what they do. It's terrible. For me, I've done quite a lot of still painting musicians, sometimes from live stream. This week I've been in the room, I've been at Cambridge Jazz Festival. My residency at Jazz in the Round has started up again. I could have chosen to go to more gigs. I feel like I should have done more to support the Vortex when they were open for a few weeks. But I'm hoping that they sold their 20 tickets every night and didn't need me. But, you know, these places everywhere needs our support, and that's kind of hard. But for me, it's been good not to be running around like a lunatic, actually. And once I got over the initial shock of losing all the work that I had lined up, it's been good to just take stock a bit, do some other things.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Other things. So you, just to get it, just to be clear, you don't just paint improvising musicians. You also do abstracts, landscapes, also jazz musicians.
I do a lot of jazz.
Okay.
So I think that the jazz thing kind of came about because the instrumentation in jazz is the same as in improvised music. So a lot of times I would be painting trios or quartets, and people would assume that they were jazz groups because they have the same lineup. As well as that, I did a fantastic, and it really was like one of my big moments. I did a 3-day festival in Gateshead called On the Outside Festival, and it was organised by Jazz North East, but it was based on Derek Bailey's Company Week. where Jazz Northeast invited 10, I think, musicians to go up for 3 days and work in small groups, groups that hadn't played together before. And they kind of built me a stage, a studio on the side of the stage that I worked in for 3 days with all these small groupings of this, from this larger group of musicians. And it was a real luxurious position, and I produced loads and loads and loads of work.
Wow.
And it was all fully improvised music. But because it was in Gateshead, and because I had a big exhibition of that work at Newcastle Arts Centre, I didn't want to bring the work back down south. I felt that it should stay in the area for a while. And I approached the Sage, which have a jazz festival, the Gateshead International Jazz Festival. I approached the Sage, and Ros Rigby, who was the organiser at the time, eventually agreed to me having a big exhibition in the Sage, which is a most amazing venue to exhibit, and also to be resident artist on the jazz festival the following year. So that was the first major jazz festival that I painted at, and that was also when I changed my materials quite a bit, because I used to work on board, and I worked a lot with collage, and I did a lot more drawing with graphite stick. But these boards were very floppy, and so the logistics of working at a festival in a large venue where I was going from auditorium to auditorium meant that I had to have something that I could work on, that I could then just stand somewhere or hang quickly or stand on a chair, or actually the public want to see the work. So that's when I started to work on canvas, on a really, I hadn't really worked on canvas before that festival. So that was a turning point, and I never ever felt that I was as competent on canvas as I was on board, because it had limited my technique rather than expanded it, and it was a new surface, a completely different set of technical rules going on. And also, coming from a metalwork background, I never felt I had the confidence to say I was a painter. In my college in Camberwell, painting was the high art and craft was the lower art. And even though I'd been making two-dimensional work for donkey's years, I used to say, I make decorative surfaces or I draw at gigs. I just never, I don't know, the day that I called myself a painter was, without feeling like a fraud, was really a big moment. I mean, now I say I'm a painter. But on my business card, I say I'm a painter of live music, even though this year I've painted loads of landscapes, loads of abstracts. I still call myself a painter of live music, but yeah, I do paint other things, and I try to paint other things with the same energy that I approach a gig. So if I paint a landscape, I like to go at dusk, because I know that I'm fighting against the light, and the light changes and everything becomes really defined. But as well, I know that there's going to be a cut-off point. When it gets dark, I can't do it anymore. So it's like having the time limit, the urgency, the movement in the landscape, all of that I'm looking for. I'm not looking for static calm, even if that's what's in front of me.
Okay, wow, fantastic. And we've talked about festivals, but then there's loads of festivals that you play at, right? That you perform at. Perform is the right word, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, and also including the Vision Festival in New York, NYC. When was that?
2018.
Oh, like recent. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And how did that happen?
It happened because How did it happen? It happened because I knew about it, and I guess it happened because of the power of the internet, because I saw that Archie Shepp and Roscoe Mitchell were going to be playing at the Vision Festival in New York, and I thought, wow, I just really want to go and paint that. So I wrote to them, and they invited me, and I went to Brooklyn and spent 5 nights painting all of these amazing greats. I mean,
Oh.
as well as greats, all of these fantastic improvisers, free jazz musicians in a tiny auditorium in Brooklyn called really lovely venue called Roulette. Yeah, so I mean, so Nashik Waits, Ambrose Akinmasure, Mary Halverson, Joel Leonge.
Yeah.
I mean, just an amazing lineup, 5 days. So that's one that was really great, and I'm so glad that I did that. But another relationship that I've had, which is just been really fantastic, has been with Confrontazione Festival in Nickelsdorf, which is 40 years now. That festival's been going, and this year was the first year for 40 years that it didn't happen.
Okay. Yeah.
And I first went to that with Alan, who played at it, and I did a few draw-ins there, or took a small kit, because when I fly, it's difficult to take a large kit. So I took a small kit, and then I sent the images to Hans Faub, and so he invited me back the following year as the official artist on it, and I had an exhibition of the work I'd made the previous year, and I did the whole festival. And then the following year I went back again, but really under my own steam, just because it was such a great thing. And I think Alan was playing again that year.
Okay.
Or maybe not, I don't know. And another small Austrian festival that came out of that is Kaleidophon.
Okay, yes, I've heard of it.
Which is a beautiful little festival. These are really stunning small festivals that immaculate sound and brilliant musicians from Europe mainly, and I think they would have more. Some musicians from the USA. They would have more if there was more of a budget. I think all of these countries are losing their budgets.
Yeah.
And I've sort of concluded that the big festivals, I mean, I loved doing the We Out Here festival last year. That was so fantastic. And I went there with my family, my kids went, because it's a young festival. Our grown-up kids wanted to come, and it was just a brilliant thing for me to, and also to have so much exposure, because it's a big audience that are actually watching you work. So, you know, I sold loads of work. It was really it was a kind of turning point. It was a really good moment, and I'm happy. I really would love to do more of that stuff, but equally, I want to. Time is short, you know. I mean, I'm 60 nearly. I'm not 60, but I'm 59, and I kind of feel like I've got the energy to do these things now, and but I feel that part of what lockdown has shown me is I want to be selective about what I do, and actually, you know, I think if when travel opens up and I see festivals that I really like the look of, I think I'll just try and make it happen that I go to them, rather than worrying about the festival that's paying me a fee. Or, you know, it's great when a festival pays me a fee. It's so great because it takes the pressure off of selling the work. But actually it costs me a small fortune to do a festival, because I spend so much on materials.
Right.
And if you've got to start travelling to them, and you've got, you know, and stay in, then it's great, even if the festival is not a rich festival and it can help you out with accommodation and something towards your travel, then I kind of consider that stuff, because there are things that I really want to do.
Okay,
you know.
Amazing. Wow. Okay, and I saw the list of all those festivals and the residencies that you've done, different festivals everywhere. It's just amazing how much you've spread your wings. And so tell me, how did you guys meet? Some around that time when you were starting to paint, and you mentioned a project that you started.
No, I knew Alan. Alan was a good friend with the trumpet player, and I knew Alan for 10 years before we were together.
Right.
Alan lived in Leeds, and he was part of the improv scene in Leeds.
I know all about it.
Yeah, you probably talked about it last month. And so when me and the trumpet player would go to Leeds, we would stay with Alan and go to the Termite Club, and Alan and I always got on really well, but there was no romantic sort of inclination.
No.
We were just good friends. But then when in the interim years between meeting him in the sort of probably 1980, and we got together in 1991. But in those years in between, I would just see Alan. Like I went to WOMAD once, and he was there. I always, if I bumped into Alan anywhere, which I did at several occasions, festivals, gigs, we'd always hang out, we'd always have a laugh. We were mates and we knew each other, but it wasn't anything, there wasn't any kind of thing going on between us until Alan moved to London in 1990, and we started seeing each other around at gigs. We were both single, but we both needed a place to live. So we talked about sharing a flat together. So we started looking at flats, and then I did his poster for a tour that he was doing, and the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Yes.
Right.
So we got together in 91. We've been together for nearly 30 years.
Wow.
2021 will be our March next year will be our 30th anniversary. We've got 2 grown-up sons, gorgeous sons, 18 and 23. And we love each other, and we have a lot of fun, and we have our separate worlds, but we spend a lot of time together. And he's great. He's right behind me and in what I do, and I don't imagine, I really don't imagine how all this would be if I wasn't with Alan. I think having the children made me much more serious about what I do, because there was suddenly two other lives depending on us, and I kind of, when my second son was born, I kind of thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to make a living? I can't, I've got to maybe change my path and be something else. But I just thought, do you know what? I trained for years to be an artist, and I'd done so much work on the change from being a 3-dimensional artist to a 2-dimensional artist. I just thought, really, I just really need to be more serious about what I'm doing. And I had to, at that time, with the kids, I had to give up something to a certain extent, because I was working in schools. I used to work with an organisation called Cloth of Gold, which screen printed banners in schools. I did that part-time. I worked in a picture frame as part-time. I did performance myself. I'd done 2 Arts Council funded tours of actually doing performance, not painting. I had a painting studio also in Stoke Newington, and I was a mum, and it was like, I can't do all these different things anymore. No. So I decided to concentrate on, I guess, more on the painting side of what I was doing for a while. So the performance went out the window for a bit, but although I must say that's come back into play this year, I've done the last three years I've been doing performance stuff again.
So performance stuff is not the painting stuff?
No, live performance pieces with using my props, my bits and pieces, and interacting sonically with musicians. I would never say that I was making music, because I don't. I just make a racket, but and I have sonic props that I use.
I saw there's a YouTube video of you with Maggie Nichols, and I forgot who else. There's another lady, and you are sort of taping together bits and pieces of something with...
Was that the recent gig I did with Maggie? So I recently did a gig with Maggie Nichols and Thurston Moore, which was amazing.
That's the one.
Yeah. That was one of the last ones before lockdown. That was at Alan's Club at Flim Flam. Yeah, and that was, in that gig, I would be using things. It's kind of a bit, it's sort of clowning in a way. It's kind of theatrical, using things. Yeah, so I might use packing tape, which when you when you
Right,
pull
yeah.
it, creak,
Makes a
creak,
sound,
creak,
yeah.
and just, I mean, you know, I have got lots of things in this room that I would be making sounds with,
Right.
and I like to, you know, things that I like to use. I like to use a ladder. I like to use plumbers' poles. I like to use height. I like to make real time sculpture.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
with things that I know. So there are things that I've worked with for years props that I know what they can do. I know their abilities, their limitations. I know how to join something together. I know how to make something very quickly that is both visual and sonic. And hopefully entertaining people. I have a small fan base of friends that will come to those gigs that love that stuff. And I mean, also, so it came about. I asked Thurston if he would like to do it. Oh no, actually, it was the other way round. Alan asked Thurston if he'd like to do a gig, and we'd had a conversation before about doing something together, and Thurston said, well, it's time I did my duo with Gina. And then that freaked me out so totally, because I've never worked with him before, and he does have a bit of a reputation. So it was a big number for me. So I thought, no, I can't do this. I've got to get a third person involved.
Yeah.
And in that situation, the only person that I could think of that is, and the absolute professional that I love to work with, is Maggie. Because I know that whatever is going on, I've felt confident enough to know that Maggie could carry that situation.
Okay, great.
And support me in that situation. So yeah, it was good. It was a really nice thing. But a couple of years ago at Flim Flam, I did a thing with Spanish vocalist Marta Sanserrano, who is truly amazing. And we did 2 nights. We did a night at Flim Flam, but we also did Rick's gig, Skronk. We did two gigs. Yeah. And because the venue at Skronk is really a big warehouse space, I was able to set up this really big sort of setup, very visual, very sculptural setup to start off with. I quite like having a big setup that I can manipulate.
Yeah.
Or I can just do a suitcase gig where I take a few things and expand, the things pop out, let's say.
Okay, wow, fantastic.
Yeah, so that's a kind of different side to what I do, but that is something I really like to do, and I like to be in a position. I don't do it unless I've got time, because it's not something where I just want to rock up with a few things. I like to have at least a whole day to work on things and prepare things. I mean, Alan and I have done a bit of recording in here where we've done stuff for Freedom, for their streamed stuff that they've been putting out. And also we did a thing with Blanca Regina, who is amazing. She does, her and Steve Beresford do Strange Umbrellas, which is a gig where they go to different venues and put on a gig with multi-arts projects. But they did an online Strange Umbrellas, and Alan and I did a performance in here that we filmed, and Blanca edited it. Blanca and Pierre Beauvoir Patron, who is who works with their partners, but he works with her, and they do lots of projects. They're making a film about Terry Day, for example.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, Terry Day.
Yeah. So in lockdown, Alan and I have done a few live things. We did something in the middle of a field where we were camping that went to Freedom, the Monday night thing from the Vortex that I've been talking about. So yeah, we've done a few things that I mean, in this time it's quite convenient to be in a couple with somebody that you can work with, it seems, because a lot of people have had to stream solo stuff. But because we're together, we can work together. We used to do more work together early on, and then I did my first performance tour with Alan and Mark Sanders and Sue Farrar, and then we went on and stretched my wings with other people, and I love working with Alan, but it's good to have develop my own
Yeah.
group of people that I work with
Right.
and keep changing that.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of Alan again, so do you like Alan the what Alan does? You
Yeah,
like
of
his
course.
music?
I
What
love-
do you like? Just tell me what
I
do you like about
I
what
like
Alan
I
does?
like the power in what Alan does.
Okay, great.
He's a powerful player.
Yes.
And I like his playing when it's at its most abstract and when it's at its most powerful, I think. I love his baritone playing.
Right.
He's also recently got a tenor, so I'd like
Yeah.
to see him do more on that. He's going a bit with the clarinet, and there's some that he's working with the clarinet. I mean, it doesn't always have to be powerhouse, of course.
No, yeah.
But I really like what he's doing on the bass clarinet as well. So
Right.
when we did the duo thing recently, he worked with the bass clarinet, and I worked with lots of things that visually kind of responded to that. I bought
Yeah.
these big white polystyrene balls that so it was a black and white visual going on. I mean, I had coloured things coming into play, but it was so, and also it's interesting because Alan was a visual artist.
Yes.
Alan was
it
a painter.
Yeah.
That he does have a visual, he does have an aesthetic, and he's very. I really value his opinion about my painting as well. I mean, he taught me a lot of stuff in the early years when we first shared our flat. I used to use a small room as my studio, and Alan would be practicing in the other room, and then we'd come together for a cup of tea, and I'd always ask him his opinion about what I'd just done. And in those days, in order to because I was doing more two-dimensional work, I used to set up still lives in the spare room and make myself paint them, because I felt like if I'm going to say that I'm a painter, I should be able to paint something that looks like what it's meant to be. So I started doing all these still lives, and when I would get bit, I'd say, "Oh, Alan, I've worked for days on this bit and it's still really wrong," and he'd just say, "Well, just paint it out, G." And I'd be like, "What do you mean? I've spent a week painting one apple or whatever, and you're telling me to paint it out." But it was really good because it was like someone acting like my tutor in a way in an area that he'd trained in but I hadn't.
Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah.
So that was very good. He has a completely different approach to visual art to me, but we love to go and see exhibitions together, and I do. He'll say, I'll ask him a question about my work, and he'll say, "Oh, gee, I don't know about that," and I'll go, "But you do." So once I force his opinion, it'll always be an opinion that I value.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Great. This is amazing. I mean, this is a very fruitful, loving association that you've got, a union
Yeah.
you've got together. This is amazing. I was just thinking maybe somebody should make maybe a short film about, your days of sharing a flat,
Well, I think also it's a bit like, I remember Stuart Lee, whose partner is Bridget Christie. They're both comedians, and Stuart always says, they all think we're having a laugh around our ass all the time. Well, it's a kind of the same with. We live in a small 2-bedroom flat, and we've got 2 kids. One is not living with us at the moment. There's 3 of us in the two-bedroom flat. It's not necessarily a creative environment. Of course it is. We've got our records, we've got our books, we've got, everything. But you can't, it's not like I'm going in and throwing paint on the dining table and Alan's walking around playing a saxophone really loudly.
That's exactly how I was imagining
exactly. It's not. I think if we didn't have the restrictions of the kind of size of the environment that we live in, it might be more like that. But actually we're quite ordinary folk, and we're like, anyway, but you could tell, you can walk in and you can say, oh yeah, there's art around, and not my art necessarily, but there's music around, there's art around, but it's not a messy environment.
Okay, yeah. Okay. That was amazing. I was imagining things. Okay, I have pretty much asked you everything that I wanted to ask you, Gina. And I know that this actually there are half-baked questions forming in my head, but I'll leave them for another time. Is there anything else you would like to say, put out there?
Oh gosh, I think I've said quite a lot.
You have, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with what I've said, I think.
Okay, well,
And,
fantastic.
I think I've just given you an overview of what I do and how I approach it.
Loads.
And,
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. This has been an absolute pleasure talking
my
to you
pleasure.
in this amazing environment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm so privileged to have this space to work,
Yeah.
which you know, with the gentrification of North London, I don't know how long it will last, but it's my room. It's my room of my own. You know.
Yeah.
It's what I think every woman needs.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said to Alan during our interview, that it's my fantasy to own a few of your paintings one of these days when I have this, creative loft.
Well, there's plenty to choose from, Tarek.
Yes, amazing.